A disciple approached, bowed before the Buddha, his eyes full of sorrow and confusion. Venerable Buddha, I just witnessed a mother's pain that is beyond endurance. She lost her child. I wanted to comfort her, but I could not. People say time heals, the disciple continued, his voice soft but heavy. But I see these wounds only make people live as if they are not alive, like a soulless shadow. A mother just lost her child. What can I say? All my words of comfort become clumsy. The disciple paused, touching on the deepest question. You taught that all things are impermanent. That is the doctrine I have internalized. But if impermanence can take away a breath, take away the life that a mother lovingly carried and nurtured ... then what is left to believe? Even my faith wavers with her piercing cry. The Buddha calmly looked at the disciple, his eyes filled with tranquility. He did not rush to explain. My son, he softly replied, his voice warm and gentle like a spring. You have seen correctly. There are pains that do not need to be explained or named. These pains do not need to be understood by intellect, but only need to be sat with in silence. I tell you, I have no advice for this situation, because advice sometimes is a way to push away the pain. But it is in that genuine pain that you will find awakening. This sorrow is a part of the truth. The only thing you can offer her is listening. Sit there without trying to lessen it, without offering words of comfort. Your gentle presence, your silent acceptance of her pain, that is true compassion. 1. When the heart stops believing in its own beat, the mother, after the horrifying moment of loss, is no longer herself. My son, the Buddha spoke softly, looking into the distance as if seeing the image of the mother in his mind. Don't you see? There are deaths that not only take one person, but also take away the reason for the person left behind to continue living. For a mother, her child is not just flesh and blood, but a heartbeat placed outside her own chest. When that heartbeat stops, her own heart also stops believing in its own life. The mother still breathes, still walks, but these are just lifeless survival reflexes. Like a clock with a broken spring, the hand stands still even as time passes outside. She sees the sunrise, but that sun no longer holds the meaning of a new day. It is just the tired extension of the old night. She no longer knows who she must wake up for, who she must cook a meal for, whose small shirt she must fold while waiting for them to return. The Buddha continued. All those daily actions, those invisible threads that weave the meaning of her life, have been severed simultaneously. The road ahead is dark, not because there is no light, but because the light no longer has a purpose to move towards. The disciple listened in silence, feeling every word as if it were touching the cold emptiness in the mother. You must understand, the Buddha whispered. This pain is a destructive truth. It is not a sorrow that can fade. It is the collapse of her entire personal structure, of the title mother that she carries. She did not just lose her child. She lost her identity as a mother. Now who is she? She does not know. And this very confusion is what is more terrifying than death. Her life now feels like a betrayal. She feels guilty for still having breath, for still feeling warmth while her child is cold. You see, the pain has turned into a self-destructive spiral, making the mother lose the ability to trust in anything anymore, even the heartbeat that is supposed to continue within herself. 2. When the pain is too great to name, when the pain reaches its peak, it surpasses the human capacity for expression. The mother is no longer able to cry. Do you see her cry, my son? The Buddha asked, his voice now holding a hint of regret. Venerable Buddha, at first she cried, a heartrending scream. But after that, only silence remained. Her face was like a rock, emotionless. That is right, the Buddha confirmed. That is the point where the pain has become too vast, too heavy to be named. Tears are the soul's attempt to escape suffering. But when the pain is so deep and dense, the tears have turned into a stone in the chest. The mother does not cry, not because she is accepted or grown stronger. On the contrary, she has been completely paralyzed by the pain. All her energy and strength have been channeled into enduring the weight of that invisible stone. That stone, my son, is the condensation of all unreleased emotions, the incomplete love, the helplessness, the anger at impermanence, the regret, and the fear of a future without her child. It sits right where the heart is, suffocating every flow of emotion. The mother is now unable to cry and also unable to smile. She has been transformed by the pain into a frozen entity. The Buddha emphasized the importance of respecting this painful silence. Do not try to melt that stone immediately, disciple. Do not use words to chip away at it. When the mother stops crying, it is because she is fighting to survive. If tears are how the soul finds its way out, then this freezing is how the soul protects itself from total collapse. It is her final defense mechanism. Your task, and that of anyone who wishes to listen, is to sit beside that stone, without judgment, without fear of its coldness. When she feels safe, feels accepted in that freezing state, perhaps one day the stone will begin to melt, and the tears will be able to find their way back. So, remember, when facing ultimate loss, do not look for tears. Look for presence. Do not try to comfort the intellect. Just sit beside the naked truth of a heart that has stopped believing in its own beat. My son, what usually happens when people learn of this pain? The Buddha asked softly, as if opening a lesson on the misunderstanding of kindness. Venerable Buddha, people come, bringing offerings, and try to say good things. They say, be strong, time will heal. It was God's will, the disciple replied, his voice filled with discomfort. Yes, the Buddha confirmed. They say, be strong, but look, they say that to a person whose very heart has been broken. Those words, although they come from kindness, become a cruel demand. A strong person is one who can carry a burden. But this mother's burden is the very emptiness, a weight that cannot be put down. They want the mother to quickly return to a normal state, the Buddha whispered. They fear her suffering, because that suffering reminds them of the impermanence of their own lives. Therefore, they use advice to chase away the pain, to chase away the very truth they do not want to face. They say, be strong. But how can one be strong when all their strength is spent holding on to a fading memory? What does strength mean in this situation? Does strength mean pretending to accept? Does strength mean pushing the stone of tears deeper into the chest? The Buddha gently pointed out, comfort, when it does not stem from deep listening, is often veiled judgment. It implies that the mother is grieving for too long, that she needs to get over the pain according to someone else's timeline. It denies her the right to be weak, the right to be shattered. The mother at this moment does not need a hero. She does not need a declaration of strength. She needs a place to be weak. She needs someone to acknowledge that being shattered is the only honest reaction to ultimate loss. True compassion does not demand strength. It accepts weakness as part of humanity. After the comforters leave, true loneliness envelops the house, and all the inanimate objects awaken to join the sorrow. And then, the silence of the house begins to speak, the Buddha said, his voice deepening. When the bustle of comforting words subsides, the mother is left alone with her house. The house, which was a home, now turns into a temple of memory. Everything around the house becomes frighteningly silent. This silence is not peaceful quiet. It is the absence of a single sound. The child's laughter, the crying, the footsteps, the call for mother. That absence creates a noise louder than any sound. Imagine! My disciple, the Buddha gently closed his eyes. The small shirt that still carries the child's scent, the blanket the child used to wrap himself in, the toy placed askew in a corner. Every detail becomes a small knife cutting into the memory. This is the most subtle and persistent form of torment. It is not a large cut, but thousands of tiny nicks, repeated every time the mother's eyes fall upon an object. She cannot throw them away, for throwing them away is denying the child's existence. But keeping them is accepting continuous torture by memory. These inanimate objects now carry an intense life force. They are not just matter. They are fragments of time that have stopped. They whisper the truth. The child was once here. And that whisper is the most painful reminder that the child is no longer here. The Buddha concluded with a profound teaching on mindfulness and suffering. Therefore, my son, when you listen, you do not just listen to the mother's lament. You listen to the sigh of the small shirt, the sob of the cold blanket. You listen to the heavy silence of the objects carrying the memory. Mindfulness in this case is the courage to sit still in the house full of those small knives, without trying to run away or reorganize. Only when you accept the whole truth of what is happening inside and outside the house can you truly sit beside the mother's pain without hurting her further. Asterisk, my son, the Buddha spoke softly, as if describing a scene invisible yet clear. In the loneliest moments, the mother will turn to ask a question that will never have an answer. Where are you? This is not a philosophical question about rebirth or liberation. This is an instinctive call, a heartfelt plea from a mother searching for her lost child. She asks everything. She asks for the empty pillow. She asks for the familiar seat at the dinner table. She asks for the cold air in the house. She asks the whole universe. But no one answers, the Buddha whispered. This silence is a cruel truth. It is not just the lack of a voice, but the absence of any evidence of the child's existence. The mother hopes to hear a signal, a small sign, but only receives boundless emptiness. Instead, there is only the sound of the wind outside the door, the Buddha described. That wind is not a word of comfort, nor is it an answer. It is just the indifference of nature, a reminder that the world continues to turn. While she has stopped, and along with the wind, comes the feeling that the whole universe has retracted. Can you feel that isolation, disciple? When you lose a part of yourself, it seems the whole universe also retracts. People still walk around, still talk and laugh, but for the mother, the world is shrunk into a single point, a cold room where she's left behind. Every light, every sound of the world outside becomes strange, meaningless. This is absolute solitude. It is not just having no one beside her, but the feeling of being completely cut off from the flow of existence. She screams in silence, but no one hears the scream of a trapped soul. The mother's existence becomes fragile, just a weak echo in a vacuumed space. The Buddha emphasized that the listener's task is not to give an answer, but to accept the silence of the universe. When you sit beside her, you must dare to accept that you also have no answer. You can only share the feeling that the whole universe has retracted by not retracting your own presence. That is the only way to reconnect her thread to humanity. Great loss is often accompanied by invisible pressure from society, culminating in the advice to accept it. And then, my son, after the silence, the world speaks again, the Buddha continued. They use another heavy word, accept it. Accept what, disciple? How can one accept losing the remaining part of oneself? The child to the mother is not a lost possession, but a biological, spiritual part of her. To ask her to accept is to ask her to cut off a part of her body, a part of her soul. And to do it calmly, the Buddha pointed out the deep contradiction of this advice, acceptance. In my teaching is the understanding of impermanence. But for the mother, acceptance at this moment is equivalent to betrayal. She feels that if she accepts, she is forgetting her child. She fears acceptance because it is the door leading to oblivion. The mother at this moment does not need logic. She does not need a lecture on ultimate truth. She needs to keep the last connection with her child, even if it is through pain. You must understand. The mother does not need to be taught how to let go. What she needs is a space to cry without being lectured. She needs to cry without being told you've cried enough, without being told to look at the other good things. She needs a place where her suffering is considered legitimate, considered sacred. The Buddha gently described the necessity of a safe space. That place, my son, is where she is allowed to deny acceptance, allowed to be angry at the world and even at the Dharma. Compassion is creating a space where she can say, I cannot accept this, without being seen as ignorant or weak. It is this respect for her right not to accept that is the gateway to true peace later on. Finally, the mother must confront the cruel difference between external time and internal time. And this is the final torment. My son, the Buddha said, looking into the distance as if seeing the flow of time. It is the conflict between external time and internal time. Time flows, but memory does not flow. Others count months, count years. They count by the calendar, by the seasons, by new events. They look to the future and say, things are getting better. He described the difference between the two worlds. But for the mother, she does not count by the calendar. She counts by pain. She counts the number of times her heart aches with remembrance. A month passes for outsiders in 30 days. A month passing for the mother can be thousands of heart contractions, thousands of times an old image returns. She counts by the fading scent on the shirt, by the last dent in the mattress, by the repeated absence of a call. The passing of external time is a betrayal. Each new day is one day further from her child, one day that fades precious details. Meanwhile, her memory clings tightly, refusing to let go, because that is all she has left. Her task is not to let memory flow away, but to learn to live with this conflict. To learn to accept that she is living in two time streams at once, a fast current of the world and a frozen current of memory. You cannot ask her to step out of that frozen time stream. You can only sit by the bank and accept that, for her, every beat of the heart is a reminder that the child was once here. Compassion is not pulling her forward, but respecting where she stands, in the middle of a time that has stopped. My son, the Buddha began, his voice gentle but touching on the nature of survival. After a long struggle with loss, a profound change takes place within the mother. The pain does not vanish, but it changes its form. It is no longer a fierce, sudden guest, but it becomes an inseparable part of breathing. At some point, the mother no longer hopes to forget. The struggle to forget is too exhausting, and she realizes that forgetting the pain also means forgetting the last part of her child. Therefore, a silent acceptance takes place, no longer hoping to forget, only learning to live with the internal void. The mother begins to realize that the void is not a flaw that needs to be filled, but the undying legacy of love. This void, my son, is the space where love once resided. It is the shape of the child preserved in the soul. If she fills it with distractions or false comfort, she will lose the last form of her child. And so, pain becomes the habit of breathing. Just as one learns to breathe with an old wound, the mother learns to exist with the void. Every breath taken carries a little weight, a little ache, but it has become so familiar that if the pain disappeared, she would feel alienated from herself. The Buddha explained the meaning of this transition. This is an unromantic evolution of compassion. The mother does not become strong in the worldly sense, but she becomes truer to her pain. She stops fighting the truth. She embraces the pain as a silent companion, a reminder of how deeply she once loved. Your task when observing this moment is to respect that internal reorganization. Do not be surprised or hasty to declare she's okay. She is not okay, but she is living honestly with that state of not being okay. And that is a great step on the path of mindfulness and acceptance. And then night comes again, the Buddha said, his voice containing deep empathy for human loneliness. During the day, light and superficial busyness can hide the pain. But when night falls and the world sleeps, every layer of pretense shatters. All the objects in the house, which were silent, now begin to scream in the darkness. Night is the cruelest accuser. It brings absolute quiet, and in that quiet, the mother hears the louder silence of her child. The empty bed becomes twice as cold, and the loneliness becomes dense, suffocating. In that moment, the mother seeks a final form of connection, a personal ritualistic act. She cannot call the child loudly, because she knows the child will not answer. She cannot turn on the light, because the light will only expose the truth of the empty chair. Therefore, the mother performs a secret and sacred act, whispering the child's name in the wind. That whisper, my son, is not madness. It is an effort to maintain existence. She calls the child's name, as if that sound can retain a sliver of the child's presence in this physical space. As long as she calls the name, the child is still here, if only in the wind passing by. This is the mother's final and most loving resistance to oblivion. She knows no one hears, but she must still call. That call is the most vivid proof of a love that never dies. It is the invisible thread she ties to the world of the soul, a promise never to let go. The Buddha reminded the disciple of the role of silence in these moments. You cannot participate in that whispering ritual, but you can respect it. You can understand that, for the mother, night is not a time for rest, but a time to perform the final duty of motherhood, holding on to existence. And you ask me again about my role. The role of the Dharma in this pain, the Buddha said. His eyes tranquil but full of authority. I am not comfortable. This statement is not coldness, but the highest respect. For comfort is to wish to lessen, and to listen is to share the burden. To comfort means I try to alleviate her pain with words, with philosophy. I want to fix her to bring her back to a state I deem normal. But this pain does not need to be fixed. It needs to be acknowledged. Listening, conversely, is my acceptance of the entire burden of the pain she is carrying. I allow her pain to flow through me, without judgment, without transformation. I share the cruel truth of impermanence in this very moment, beside her. I sit beside you, the Buddha emphasized. I sit beside the mother. I sit beside the pain. I do this not to speak, but not to leave. My unchanging presence is the final and strongest message. It says, I see your pain and I accept it as a part of existence. You are not alone in this truth. That presence is the most stable foundation you can give to a person who has lost all foundation. Remember this, disciple. In the great sorrows of humanity, true compassion does not lie in grand words, but in a small, unwavering presence. That is the Dharma of silence. My son, the Buddha continued, his voice carrying an absolute stillness. You have seen the mother isolated by pain, pushed away by the world's comfort. She carries a stone in her chest and struggles with the words demanding her to accept. But there is a delicate moment of transition, a moment when the truth is allowed to become simple, allowed to shed all layers of philosophy. That moment is when the pain is called by its right name. The mother in ultimate despair does not need a prayer. She does not need promises of heaven or the next life. She also does not need a lecture on ultimate truth. All those things are too vast, too distant from the physical reality of a body dissolving from loss. What she needs, and this is the most precious thing you can give, is just a simple recognition. She needs someone to stand before her, look straight into the abyss she is facing, and say one single word, I see. You are hurting. The Buddha emphasized that these words are not superficial sympathy, but an affirmation, a certification of the legitimacy of the suffering. When you say, I see, you are hurting, you are not trying to take away her pain. You are only taking away the loneliness of the pain. You have broken the wall the mother built to protect herself from judgment. She is too tired of having to pretend to be strong, of trying to explain or hide her brokenness. These words, my son, are a permission. They permit her to be weak, to be without answers, to be non-accepting. It is a confirmation that, in this chaotic universe, at least one person sees her undeniable truth. It is the gift of presence that demands no change. Her pain, when called by its right name, becomes a connecting bridge instead of a separating wall. The mother feels that, finally, she's no longer fighting alone. Just one word, I see you are hurting, but that word carries the weight of 1,000 scriptures, because it is spoken in complete silence and listening. It is the liberation from the burden of having to justify her own suffering. And then you will see a small miracle happen after that recognition. The Buddha continued, his voice now carrying a faint hope. After the stone in the chest is softened by non-judgmental compassion, the tears will return. The return of tears is not the return of weakness. On the contrary, it is a sign of potential strength, the beginning of the melting process. Tears are not failure. They are the soul's way of finding a path out of a long night where it was trapped. The mother has kept the pain frozen for too long, and that freezing was a temporary survival. But true survival requires movement, circulation. Tears are circulation. They wash away the accumulated tension, wash away the suppressed anger, wash away the solidified loneliness. It is a flood passing through the frozen area, carrying the warmth of life. Observe closely, disciple. These tears are completely different from the initial scream. The initial scream was horror, denial. The returning tears are tears of release, of letting go of control over the pain. It is the acceptance that the pain is so great that it needs to flow out, instead of being suppressed. The Buddha pointed out that comfort should happen in this moment, but not with words. In the moment the tears return, you do not need to say anything more. Just your presence is like a steady vessel, so she can pour out her burden. Every tear shed is a release, a small step taking the soul out of the dark room. It is the courage to feel instead of being paralyzed. Respect these tears, my son. Do not wipe them away hastily. These tears are purification. It is the way the mother learns that even though she has lost her child, she still has the capacity to feel deeply. And that capacity to feel the capacity to love is what death can never take away. After the flood of tears, the mother's vision begins to change. She does not see a new path to happiness, but she sees a path to truth. When the temporary cleansing subsides, the mother will not see a blazing sun. She will only see a faint light at the end of the path of suffering. This is not the light of joy or euphoria. It is the light of clarity. This light is the light of acceptance, but a completely different acceptance from the one the world demanded. It is the acceptance of a cruel and beautiful truth, that her child has truly remained within this very pain. The mother finally understands that if she tries to fill the void or forget the pain, she will lose her child a second time. The child's presence has been transformed from an external physical presence to an internal spiritual presence. The Buddha explained this transformation. The pain is no longer a contradiction. It becomes a sacred storage space. Every time the heart aches, it is not a new wound, but a reminder that love is still alive, still hurting. And that is the only place where the child still exists clearly and undeniably. This acceptance does not bring happiness in the ordinary sense, but it brings a deep peace. She no longer has to fight the truth that the child is gone. She only needs to learn to live with the truth that the child has become a part of her. The pain is the undeniable proof of eternal love. And in that faint light, the mother sees the truth that as long as she still breathes, as long as she can still feel this pain, the child has never truly left her. This is an awakening without scriptures, my son. It is the awakening born from the very abyss of motherhood. She no longer seeks the child in the world of the living, but finds it in the world of purified memory and emotion. After the person finds that faint light of acceptance, I will softly speak one word, not to begin a lecture, but to gently confirm what she has discovered on her own. The Buddha said, I will say you have not lost, only exchanged places. This statement from the Buddha is the truth, but it is not a command. It confirms the transformation of life, that matter dissolves, the essence never perishes, only moves to another form. However, the Buddha knows that even truth can be a burden. And then I will immediately add, but I will not ask you to believe. Why do I say that, my disciple? Because I know that the horrible loss has not only taken the child, but has also damaged the mother's very ability to trust. Her heart has been broken, and the ability to open up to belief has also been frozen. Belief, my son, is a fragile flower. It cannot be imposed. It needs care and time to grow. After such a tragedy, even belief in the greatest good and the truth of liberation needs to be resurrected. It died along with the child. Therefore, I respect her time. I respect her doubt. I allow her not to believe my words right now. My compassion is patience. I will not demand that she believe because even belief sometimes needs time to be reborn. Salvation is not in believing something, but in being accepted in the state of not believing. Respecting the mother's time and skepticism, That is the pinnacle of compassion. Asterisk. And that is all I say, the Buddha concluded. After that, I sit there saying nothing more. This silence, my son, is the most complete teaching. It is the cessation of all attempts to interpret, all attempts to comfort, all attempts to heal. It is a silence imbued with deep understanding, unconditional acceptance, and boundless love. This final silence is the declaration. All words have been spoken. Now you only need to breathe and feel the presence, because sometimes, not words, not philosophy, but the gentle presence of silence is the only way to love. It is communication without language, a connection from soul to soul. My silence says, I do not need you to change. I do not need you to heal. I do not need you to believe. I only need you to be you and I to be me, sitting together in this great truth. That silence envelops the mother, envelops the pain, and envelops the world. That is where people find safe harbor after the storm of loss. That is how the Buddha listens to humanity, not with words, but with an eternal and unchanging presence.